I was raised in southern Minnesota, in a little small farm town there called St. James, Minnesota. In my late teens, I came to California because I thought Minnesota was kind of dull. And I thought there'd be a lot more in California than Minnesota. My grandfather said, "Now, you're not going to speak like a Swede, you're going to speak like an American. They're an American, not a Swede." So unfortunately, I didn't learn the language, which I think was a great loss, because speaking two languages, of course, would help me out with other languages. I went to UCLA to study anthropology and was working on general anthropology for my BA, and then I had decided to go back to Korea for my PhD work. And one of my professors, Wendell Oswald, was doing a chapter on a book on the Cahuilla Indians. And he said, "Well, since you're going to Korea, you might as well learn something about anthropology. I want some information about the Cahuilla for my book I'm writing." And he sent me out to Cahuilla land. I happened to meet an American Friends Service fellow who was working with Southern California Indians, and he took me out to visit people, and I met Jane Penn. I went to her door, and Jane Penn was a leader, an important leader at Morongo, and it's at statewide level. She was in many committees and so forth, and a real doer, a tough lady, and got things done. I told her, "I'm Lowell Bean, I'm curious, my professor wants me to find out about Cahuilla culture, and someone Dick Thomas suggested I talk to you." He was the Quaker. And she looked at me and she says, "We don't need anthropologists around here," and slammed the door. And I was stunned. And I was just standing there, and then the door creaked open a little bit, and she said, "Well, if you want to learn to be an anthropologist, we'll teach you how to be an anthropologist, and we've got a lot of work for you to do." And that work, she then took me almost immediately to the ceremonial leader of the Wanakit Cahuilla, and she began to teach me the traditional ways. And in the afternoon, I was sent to the elders. Victoria Wyrick was the first. She was the ceremonial leader. And she sat me down in the afternoons and began to teach me about traditional Cahuilla culture. And the first week I was there, since Victoria was the ceremonial leader, I was taken to the ceremonial house to my first set of funeral songs.
That first week?
First week. And that's where I met Levi Singers, and I met Joe Potencio, who was a favorite singer, and a very kind gentleman. And he also sort of took me under wing and would explain things to me, what was going on. And so I was getting a really crash course in traditional ways. And I tried to interview these elders in all the aspects of anthropology that I could think of: kinship system, social structure, economic life, but also historical things. Because these people, some of them were born in the 1870s, they were that old, so they had knowledge of everything that was happening since reservations started. So I plugged in many questions as I could about the history of the people, what happened to them, how the reservation systems are set up, and how the people integrated and became their own new culture. As we mentioned earlier, reservations became like their own cultures because they were pan-Indian. There were Indians at Morongo from several other language-speaking groups. This work. So I went to Jane Pablo Penn, ceremonial family, and a leader at Morongo, as I've said. And I said, "Jane, why don't we start a museum, our own museum, and our own publication program?" And she said, "Wow, yes, let's do it." So we called Kathy Sobel, Mariano Sobel, Tony Andreas, and we all got together and designed and put up Malki Museum. I can't remember all the others, but there were about 12 of us.
What year did Malki start? You said
It had to be the 60s, 1960s.
that was the first.
I think it was the first Indian museum in California. I did not want to write a traditional ethnography. I wanted to deal with cause and effect. That is why things are not done. Just not that you do X, Y, and Z. It's this is why you do it. And this is how it fits with something else. And there's everything that goes on is interconnected. In anthropology, we could call it systems theory. You're not just describing events, you're explaining. The information came from every source I could possibly find, interviews especially. But I had read all the anthropological books that were published, and I'd take those books to each of the informants or consultants, and I'd read them things. I'd say, this is what this guy says about you, or this is what your granduncle said about such and such, and then they would clarify things for me, or say, yes, this fits, that doesn't fit. I thought of a title for a long time, and suddenly it occurred to me, in the creation myth, it's Mukut's people. And so I titled the book Mukut's People. And it's a traditional ethnography of the Cahuilla people, as much of their traditional culture as I was able to describe. And in one book I tried to get in it.
Do you recollect if he sang any bird songs? Pedro Chino or any of the others?
Well, Joe, the bird songs were being sung by a lot of people then. The Levis down in Torres Martinez were very famous for the bird songs, and Joe sang bird songs, and the Saboba people were singing bird songs. The bird songs were Los Coyotes people were singing bird songs, particularly Kathy's brother, Kathy. They were the one traditional thing that was still alive and well in the late 1950s. The other things were slowly going. The ceremonial songs.
Why do you think the bird songs continued?
Well, it's my theory that bird songs are more secular than they are sacred. That is, if you sang the creation myth and you made an error, your ass was grass. And the whole big house might be damaged if you made an error. They were very strict about that. The Serrano were singing, the Ramon sisters were Serrano singing, they were still singing the ceremonial songs. And their nephew. And so, where am I going with that? So as a little time went on, and you had to be trained very carefully, so you didn't do it wrong. And so little by little, the younger people weren't up to it or weren't interested in it, whatever. It stopped dropping off, and Biff was one of the last in the Levi boys. Siva. Ernie Siva.
So you're saying the Ramon sisters, Dorothy Ramon?
Dorothy and Catherine.
Okay.
Were singers, which was a surprise because usually that was a man's role. And I never quite understood how that happened because it was Serrano phenomena, I think. The last singers had just gone, and there just no one else who knew them. And so the people, rather than lose them, they would break the rule that only men could sing them. And they were superb singers. And Ernie would sing with them. And they'd sing they would sing usually in the Wanakik big house at Morongo. Because there were only two big houses left then. It was the Wanakik and the Serrano, the Morongo family big house. which was still going when I came here. And
what year did you come, Lowell?
Summer of 1958.
And so, 1958?
I think it was 58.
So, you said there was the Serrano Big House and the Wanakik Big House up there on the Morongo Reservoir.
Right.
Were there any other big houses?
Well, there were,
At that time?
at sort of Santa Rosa, there was a big house. I think they were using the church, though, for their ceremonies. And Torres Martinez had, they had a traditional roundhouse. San Manuel, they were still singing up there. And Palm Springs, Palm Springs still had the Kawasik house going. Then, which Joe sang at, and
But they sing.
if you made a mistake in the big house with the other songs, it could be real trouble.
Yes.
So singing the songs in other venues, would that benefit us Cahuilla, or will it not benefit us if we're singing it out of our traditional places? Yes, that's what you're saying.
I think it became something that non-Indians wanted to hear, people who wanted to understand or appreciate Indian culture, and that's always been going on. And so the Cahuilla chose to use secular songs in order to entertain, if you will, or to teach outsiders, Melkachums. And as the fiesta system continued to branch out and pull non-Indians into it, like at Malki, then more and more people got to hear them and became interested in them. And musicologists, for example, like Paul, began to study them.
So it sounds like it was more of a benefit for us to be listened to out.
Yeah. And to just celebrate your own thing, because they could be fun. And the other songs are too serious to mess around with.
There's a sign.
Well, let's just talk about why the bird sings, why the bird singing continues, perhaps, other than the other, and its value to the people. It's heartwarming having seen it almost go, and it was almost gone. For me to go out and see a 6-year-old kid singing birds with a rattle, because I see this important aspect of traditional culture still here, and if you will, it's what I facetiously call social glue. It keeps people together as an ethnic entity, and you have to have that to do it. And this is true of all peoples, and it's why we have things like this. But you eat it on, just like with Cahuilla, you eat it on ceremonial occasions. You pull out the lutefisk, and here you pull out the wee wish, and this makes a statement about what you are, how you feel about yourself. So the continuation of the bird songs, I think, has been a remarkable instrument for continuing Cahuilla identity, and it looks like it will for a long time more. And that's what we call facetiously social glue.
I'm going to use that one in my film, so.
Okay.
I'm using that one.
And we all have to have it. Every culture has to have those things. And the Paeon game, for example, would be the same sort of thing. Keeping it together is it takes you directly to your ancestors and brings them to you.
Give us a little history on Uncle Biff, Anthony Andreas, how he started, bringing back the songs, who he learned from.
Well, he learned from both Joe Potencio, for sure. Who else?
I remember he said his grandmother.
Yeah, she was a Kawasik, I think. And he learned from the Levi family, who were a bit more, that lasted there longer, I think, than it did anyplace else. But Biff was how shall I call him? He was a catalyst. He was a man of a very kindly disposition. He was a man who wanted to share his culture and make sure that people understood it and did it correctly. And Joe Potencio was that way too, and I'm sure that's why he worked so closely with Biff. And Biff, of course, taught it to his children and to many others. You worked with Biff, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So his history as a keeper of the culture, I think, is strong. And he was just one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. He was a kindly disposition and good humor, and I have a lot of fun with him.
Did you ever attend any of his social events?
Oh yeah,
Ranch?
a lot of them, yeah.
Up at his birdhouse?
Yeah, whenever I could. I think I did most of the time. And they were crowded and they're happy moments, a lot of good times going on there. And because his personality washed off into others. He was devoted to his culture and his people, the Pinectum.
Early morning people.
Mm-hmm. And the same could be said of Joe. Joe also was keeping his culture. And there was just that one problem. If you couldn't mix the sacred and the secular. It caused trouble. And the honorable thing to notice, I think, people could have taken advantage and sung the wrong things in the wrong places to get prestige or something. But I think Cahuilla culture as a whole was strong enough that the social control mechanisms were in place.
They still are.
Good.